Chapter 2, The Book. Doug Weapon was not avoiding the bookstore. At least that's what he told himself as he stood in the garage, staring at the half-disassembled engine block of his old project car. The hood was propped open, tools laid arranged with suspicious neatness across a workbench, sockets lined in ascending order, a torque wrench balanced carefully along the edge, shop rags folded like he actually intended to use them. Outside, Ohio City hummed quietly through the open garage door. A truck rumbled down West 44th. Somewhere farther off, the Red Line train groaned across its tracks, headed toward downtown. The wind carried the faint smell of thawing pavement and brewery mash, drifting from the flats. Spring in Cleveland. Doug had told himself last night that today was the day. He'd finish the manifold and reseat the gasket. Make some damn progress for a change. Instead, his attention kept drifting. Not to the engine, to the workbench, to the book. The Silent Gods and the Forgotten Ages. It sat there like it always had. Doug exhaled slowly. This was ridiculous. He grabbed a wrench and leaned into the engine bay, testing the resistance on a stubborn bolt. His knuckles protested as he gripped his edge. The metal felt colder than it should have. 12,000 years. His jaw tightened. Focus! The wrench slipped. His hand scraped hard against the housing. Damn it! He pulled back, flexing his fingers. The ache in his knuckles pulsed faintly, a familiar reminder that Cleveland winters always collected interest. Doug set the wrench down harder than necessary. Maybe this wasn't the right project to start with. Maybe he needed something smaller, manageable. The fence sprang to mind, that sagging section in the backyard that had been leaning since January. Doug grabbed a hammer and a handful of nails and stepped outside. The backyard looked exactly like Ohio City yards always did in March. Patchy grass and dead vines still clinging to the trellis. A garden that hadn't decided yet whether it was waking up or still sleeping. The sun hung bright but thin in the sky, like it hadn't fully committed to spring. Doug braced the warped fence panel back into alignment. Simple fix. Line up the nail, swing, and move on. He raised the hammer. Miranda. Doug lowered it again. Why was this so complicated? It wasn't a date. It wasn't a declaration. It was a book. An old leather book he'd bought for $3 at a rummage sale because the title had refused to let him walk away. Doug leaned his forehead briefly against the cool wood of the fence. He was a grown man. He plowed roads. He repaired drainage systems. He once replaced a transmission in a snowstorm because someone needed to get to work. Yet the idea of casually handing Miranda Alden a book made his chest tighten like he was 16 again. Unbelievable, he muttered. He drove the nail home with a single sharp strike. The fence straightened. Doug stepped back. The repair looked fine. He didn't feel better. Back inside, he poured another cup of coffee, even though the first one was barely gone. The house had that late morning quiet that made every small sound stand out. The refrigerator hum, the ticking engine block cooling in the garage, a dog barking 2 houses over. Doug's eyes drifted again. The book. He walked over and picked it up. The leather was cracked but supple, worn smooth in places as if it had been handled many times long ago. The spine creaked softly when he opened it. The text inside was dense and archaic, a strange blend of mythology, allegory, and speculative history. Faint annotations ran along the margins in handwriting too faded to read. Doug flipped forward. Skimming, a passage snagged his attention. And so the gods turned their faces from the world, and in their absence the waters rose, the sky burned, the age of man was washed clean, and only whispers endured. Doug froze. The words pressed against something delicate in his memory. Green sky, water withdrawing, then returning. He swallowed slowly. Coincidence, he muttered. Flood myths were everywhere. Ancient people loved their dramatics. Still, Doug flipped back to the title page. The Silent Gods and the Forgotten Ages. He hadn't even really meant to buy it. The rummage sale had been completely ordinary. Folding tables on a cracked driveway, boxes of mismatched dishes, paperwork stacked beside VHS tapes labeled in fading Sharpie. He remembered the exact moment he picked it up. The hesitation, the strange certainty that if he left it there, someone else would take it. That would somehow matter. Doug had laughed at himself. $3, why not? Now it sat in his kitchen like a question he hadn't meant to ask. Doug closed the book gently. He stared at it for a long moment. He could stay here, finish the fence, tighten the manifold, pretend the Bahamas were just limestone, pretend the dream was imagination. Or he could walk to the bookstore, hand Miranda the book, see what she thought. Nothing dramatic, just a conversation. His knuckles throbbed faintly. His mind refused to quiet. Doug grabbed his jacket. All right, he said quietly. He tucked the book under his arm and headed towards the door. At the threshold, he paused for a moment. Not long, just enough to acknowledge the strained tightening in his chest. Then he shook his head. It's a bookstore, he muttered. He stepped outside. Ohio City felt different now. The wind had picked up slightly, rattling loose branches along the alley. A cloud slid across the sun. Doug adjusted the book under his arm and started down the sidewalk toward Lorraine Avenue. Just a few blocks away, a small storefront window displayed a faded wooden sign. The Blackwood Archive. Rare books, historical studies, and uncomfortable questions. Doug took a breath and kept walking.